My dad is marrying someone my age, and it's beyond awkward. Imagine your dad introducing you to his new fiancée, and she's the same age as you. It's weird, uncomfortable, and I have no idea how to handle family gatherings now. I still remember the morning I woke with a mix of anticipation and dread, a feeling so strange it nearly took my breath away. It was an unusually bright day in early spring, and as the sun's first rays crept through the blinds of my modest suburban apartment, I sipped my coffee while my mind drifted between plans for the day and the nagging sense that something in my world was about to shift dramatically. My name is Jessica, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a freelance graphic designer and content creator, a career that lets me express my creativity on my own terms. I've built my life around independence and artistic passion, carving out a niche for myself in a city that pulses with energy and possibility. I've always prided myself on being true to who I am, even if that meant bucking traditional expectations. Yet, despite all my hard-won freedom, my family's old-school values have always hovered at the edges of my life, like a stubborn shadow. Growing up in a household where tradition was worshipped, I was expected to follow a clearly mapped-out path, secure a stable job, settle down, and honor family customs without question. My father, the rock of our family, had always been a bastion of conventional wisdom. His opinions were as solid as the oak tree in our front yard, a tree that had witnessed every holiday, every dinner, every moment of subtle judgment. For years, I had tolerated his insistence that I should know better, even when I pursued a career in the arts. My mother, equally entrenched in tradition, would often remind me in a gentle but firm tone, "Your choices are yours, dear, but remember that family is everything." But nothing could have prepared me for the shock that hit me one seemingly ordinary morning. Over breakfast, as I scrolled through my phone, a single sentence in a family group chat sent my heart into a tailspin. "We need to talk about Dad's fiancée." At first, I thought it was one of those casual announcements, until my father, with his usual calm assurance, declared later that day, "I'm marrying you know who." I blinked, trying to make sense of his words, and then it hit me like a freight train. His new fiancée was not only vibrant and modern, but shockingly, she was the same age as me. For a moment, the room spun. I sat frozen, my coffee cooling in my hand as my mind raced to process the absurdity of it all. My dad, the man who had always represented stability and tradition, was about to marry someone who could easily be my peer. The idea was so bizarre, so utterly defiant of every norm I'd grown up with, that I couldn't help but feel both repulsed and oddly fascinated. That evening, at a small family dinner, the tension was palpable. My dad casually introduced his fiancée, Samantha, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Jessica, meet Samantha. Isn't she wonderful?" he said, as if introducing a friend rather than a future stepmother. The room fell into an awkward silence as I tried to process the shock. Samantha's warm laugh and confident manner were in stark contrast to the familiar, staid presence of the woman I had expected my father to choose. Every smile, every polite nod from relatives only deepened my internal conflict. I loved my dad, I always had, but the idea of sharing him with someone my age was something I never imagined facing. As I excused myself to a quiet corner of the house later that night, my mind swirled with questions. How did this happen? What does it say about our family? And most painfully, where did I fit into this new equation? That night, as I lay in bed, listening to the soft hum of the neighborhood, I vowed that I would find a way to navigate this tangled web of family expectations and personal identity. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. I've always carried the burden of family expectations like an invisible backpack, filled with decades of unspoken rules, judgments, and sacrifices. Growing up, I often felt like I was living someone else's script. My father's idea of success was measured in stability and adherence to tradition, while my dreams were painted in bold, unpredictable strokes. I remember vividly a family Thanksgiving when, as a teenager, I had excitedly shared my ambition to study art and design, only to be met with a sigh and the remark, "Art is nice, but a secure career is what matters." Those words stung, and even now they echo in my mind every time I choose a path that deviates from the norm. Throughout my school years, I clung to the belief that I could bridge the gap between tradition and innovation. I spent countless hours perfecting my craft, designing posters for school events, and winning local competitions. My passion for creativity was my refuge, a beacon of light in a world that often demanded conformity. I remember the thrill of seeing my designs on the school bulletin board and the pride that came with knowing I was forging my own way, even if it was met with a raised eyebrow from my parents. After high school, I pursued a degree in graphic design, an arena where I finally felt free to express the full spectrum of my personality. I immersed myself in the art world, exploring new techniques and experimenting with bold ideas. Yet, even as I flourished in college, family expectations remained a constant, stubborn presence. Holiday gatherings and family reunions were battlegrounds where my choices were subtly critiqued. I'd listen as my father recounted his career achievements with a quiet pride, while my own accomplishments were mentioned only in passing, as if they were trivial compared to the tried-and-true paths that had come before. I often felt torn between two worlds, one of tradition and one of innovation. My family celebrated stability, yet I craved the unpredictable thrill of creating something new. It was a dichotomy that defined my very existence. And while I cherished the love and support that my family offered, I also longed for the freedom to choose my own destiny without their constant, unspoken judgment. A few months before this shocking announcement, during a particularly tense family dinner, my father had offhandedly mentioned that he might consider dating someone more in tune with the modern world. At the time, I had brushed it off as a fleeting comment, but now it loomed over me like a dark cloud. The seeds of this new reality had been sown long before Samantha's name was uttered, and I was now forced to confront the consequences of a shift that I hadn't seen coming. In those moments, as I recalled every disappointed glance and every dismissive comment about my creative ambitions, a storm of emotions built within me. I realized that the life I'd known, one filled with constant compromise, was about to be upended in the most surreal way imaginable. My mind was awash with conflicting thoughts, anger at the betrayal of tradition, sorrow for the loss of what I had once believed was secure, and a burning determination to reclaim my sense of self. The weight of years of suppressed resentment finally coalesced into a single, resolute thought. I would not let this bizarre twist define me. I would confront it head-on, no matter how awkward or painful the road ahead might be. The day my worst fears were confirmed arrived with a cold, piercing clarity. I was scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself from the humdrum of daily work, when a post caught my eye. A post from a distant cousin, full of exuberant hashtags and glossy photos. There, in bold, inescapable detail, was an announcement, introducing Samantha, my new love and partner in life. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. I clicked on the link, and a professionally shot video began to play, featuring my father and Samantha laughing together in a sunlit park. But what struck me the most was the revelation that Samantha was, shockingly, the same age as me. The camera lingered on her youthful smile and vibrant energy, qualities I had always admired in people my own age. My initial reaction was a tumult of disbelief and hurt. I couldn't fathom how my dad, whose values had been as rigid as they were predictable, could now embrace something so wildly out of step with everything I'd ever known. The very idea was absurd, and yet it was becoming my reality. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, rereading old messages and replaying conversations in my mind. Every laugh, every seemingly innocent comment from my father now took on a sinister tone. The trust I had placed in him was crumbling, replaced by a raw, unfiltered anger that simmered beneath the surface. That evening, during a rare family dinner meant to celebrate our recent successes, the air was thick with tension. My father, with his usual calm demeanor, introduced Samantha as if she were simply a new friend. "Everyone, meet Samantha," he said, his voice betraying none of the gravity of the situation. The room fell into an awkward hush as I struggled to keep my composure. My stomach churned as whispers circulated among relatives. A cousin muttered under his breath, "This is so weird," while others exchanged glances that spoke of shock and disapproval. I sat there feeling both invisible and exposed, as if the very foundation of my familial identity was being rewritten before my eyes. After dinner, I slipped away into the cool night air. I found a quiet spot on the back steps of the house and sat, head in hands, trying to process the cascade of emotions. How could my dad, the one person I'd always seen as the embodiment of stability, now choose a partner who was, in many ways, my equal? The absurdity of it was almost laughable, but the pain was all too real. I thought of all the years spent deferring to his judgments, of all the times I had hidden my true feelings to avoid conflict. And now, confronted with a future that felt utterly foreign, I knew that something had to give. As I sat there under the starry sky, a single thought crystallized. I could no longer remain silent. Whether I was ready or not, I had to confront this upheaval head-on. The betrayal wasn't just about the age difference. It was about the erasure of everything I had once believed about my family and my place in it. I resolved with trembling determination that I would demand answers. I would not let this bizarre new chapter define me without a fight. The storm was gathering, and I was ready to face it. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in a whirlwind of introspection and planning. I started by jotting down every memory, every dismissive remark, every moment of silent suffering that had led to this moment. My journal became a repository of pain and gradually of resolve. I reread old entries and found that the seeds of this conflict had been planted long ago. Each word fueled a burning determination inside me. I would reclaim my sense of self, no matter the cost. I reached out to my closest friend, Marissa, whose unwavering support had always been a beacon in my darkest hours. Over countless late-night coffee runs and long walks in the park, I vented my frustration and mapped out my plan. "You need to speak up, Jess," she insisted, her voice both gentle and insistent. "This isn't just about awkwardness. It's about your identity and your right to decide your own future." Her words resonated deeply, and I began to formulate a strategy that was as much about personal healing as it was about confronting my father. I decided that the next family gathering, an upcoming reunion at my dad's house, would be the moment to lay everything bare. I prepared a list of questions and concerns, each carefully phrased to demand clarity without descending into angry recriminations. I rehearsed what I would say, determined to keep my emotions in check even as my heart pounded with fury and sorrow. I imagined the conversation in vivid detail, the initial shock in their eyes, the tense pauses, and the raw vulnerability that would inevitably surface. At the same time, I sought solace in creative pursuits. I poured my emotions into painting, a long-forgotten hobby that now became an outlet for my pent-up feelings. With each brushstroke, I channeled my grief and anger into vibrant canvases, creating abstract expressions of the turmoil within. These sessions were both cathartic and empowering, reminding me that I was capable of turning pain into something beautiful. By the end of that tumultuous week, I felt both anxious and resolute. The decision was made. I would confront my father at the reunion. I knew the risk. It could shatter our already fragile relationship. It could alienate family members, but I also knew that I could no longer live under the weight of silence and forced conformity. I locked my journal, wiped away the tears of the past few days, and promised myself that no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be, I would stand up for who I was. The day of the family reunion arrived like a tidal wave of emotions. My dad's house, an imposing structure steeped in decades of tradition, was filled with relatives who mingled awkwardly, their laughter and forced smiles barely masking the underlying tension. I arrived early, my heart pounding as I rehearsed my words in my head. Today, everything had to change. When the time came, we gathered in the formal dining room, a space lined with ancestral portraits and heavy draperies. My father, ever the consummate host, began with a toast celebrating family unity. I listened, my mind a whirl of conflicting emotions, until the moment arrived when he casually mentioned Samantha's upcoming wedding plans. That was my cue. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room turn toward me, and said, "I have something I need to say." The room fell into a stunned silence. I took a deep breath and launched into my truth, recounting not only the shock of learning that my dad's fiancée was my age, but also the cumulative weight of years spent conforming to expectations that never truly belonged to me. "I've always admired you, Dad," I began, my voice trembling yet steady. But I can't pretend anymore that I'm okay with decisions that hurt me. I love you, but I love my life, and I won't sacrifice it for something that doesn't make sense. My words hung in the air like a challenge. My father's face, usually so composed, showed a flicker of confusion and hurt. Samantha sat silently beside him, her eyes wide and uncertain. Across the table, relatives exchanged whispers. I continued. How can you choose to start a new chapter with someone who is not only your partner, but is practically my peer? It feels like you're erasing the very identity that you claim to protect. Every sentence was an outpouring of years of pent-up resentment, a litany of moments when I felt diminished by a family that valued tradition over genuine connection. A cousin burst into tears, and an uncle mumbled something about the world changing too fast. But none of that stopped me. I demanded answers. Why my dad, the one person I'd once looked up to, could now blur the lines between parent and peer? I deserve to know, I said, voice rising. What made you think this was acceptable? My words, raw and unfiltered, resonated deeply in the charged atmosphere. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke. Then my father, his voice barely above a whisper, said, I did it because I thought it would make me happy. I thought it would make you proud. His confession was as painful as it was ambiguous, and it sent ripples of shock through the room. I felt my eyes well with tears, not just from hurt, but from the crushing realization that our lives had diverged so drastically. In that moment, I knew that this confrontation was only the beginning of a battle that would redefine our entire family. The immediate aftermath of my declaration was a chaotic blend of shock, anger, and bitter introspection. The once ordered dining room had dissolved into a cacophony of voices, some accusing, others pleading, and a few simply silent. My father's eyes darted around as if searching for an escape from the truth I had laid bare. Samantha, for her part, seemed lost, caught between her own desires and the reality of an awkward family dynamic. Outside, I found a momentary refuge in the cool evening air. I stepped onto the back porch, where the distant hum of the city offered a semblance of normalcy. I dialed my best friend, Marissa, and poured out my heart. I can't believe this is happening, I confessed, voice breaking as I recounted every painful detail. Marissa's words of comfort, "You did the right thing, Jess. Your truth matters," were a balm, but they couldn't erase the sting of betrayal and loss. Meanwhile, inside the house, the fallout rippled through every corner. Conversations that had once been filled with light banter now turned into hushed debates. A cousin, whose loyalty had always been uncertain, approached me with tearful eyes and said, "I never realized how hard you've had it. I'm sorry." That small moment of empathy was both heartening and heartbreaking. It underscored the deep fissures that had long divided our family. The tension escalated when my father, finally gathering his resolve, called for a private meeting with a few key family members later that night. In a dimly lit study lined with old photographs, he attempted to explain his choices. "I did what I thought was best," he murmured, but his words were lost in the weight of our shared pain. Every member present had their own perspective, and as voices rose in bitter debate, it became clear that our family's legacy was fracturing irreparably. I returned to the dining room where the atmosphere was thick with unresolved anger and sorrow. I felt the sting of every whispered comment, every sideways glance that now carried a charge of betrayal. In that moment, I realized that the confrontation had set off a chain reaction, one that would force each of us to face truths we had long avoided. I wasn't sure how much healing was possible, but I knew that I had to continue standing up for my own life, no matter how much it hurt. In the days that followed, the emotional storm showed no sign of abating. I found myself alone in my room more often than not, poring over memories and scribbling down my thoughts in my journal. Each entry was a battle cry, a declaration of independence from a past that had always tried to dictate my future. I reflected on every moment of silence, every dismissive remark, and realized that the pain I had endured was a burden I no longer needed to bear. After several restless nights, I reached a moment of clarity. I knew that while I loved my father, I could not allow his choices to continue defining my life. I resolved that I would no longer be caught between conflicting loyalties. I decided that I would forge a new path, a future where I could embrace my identity without having to compromise my happiness. I arranged a final, one-on-one meeting with my dad in the quiet of a local park. Beneath a canopy of autumn trees, their leaves whispering secrets of change, I confronted him once more. "Dad," I said, voice steady but laced with the years of hurt, "I love you, but I cannot continue to live in this twisted dynamic. I refuse to choose between my family and my own life." His eyes, heavy with remorse and resignation, met mine. For a long moment, we stood in silence, two figures bound by love and pain, facing a future that neither fully understood. "I'm not asking you to change overnight," I continued, "but I need you to understand that my life is mine. I have to make decisions that honor who I am, even if it means redefining our relationship." My words hung in the cool air, a final, irrevocable declaration. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of liberation, an affirmation that I was ready to step forward into a future shaped by my own choices. As we parted ways that day, the weight of our shared history pressed down on me, but it was tempered by a new resolve. I knew there would be lasting wounds, but I also knew that I had reclaimed my right to live authentically. The final decision was made, and though the fallout from that day would echo in our family for years to come, I felt an undeniable lightness, a freedom that came from standing up for myself. In the months that followed, life slowly began to take on a new shape. I immersed myself in my work, channeling the emotional turmoil into creative projects that pushed the boundaries of my art and design. My freelance career blossomed as I landed new clients who admired not only my talent, but the resilience that had carried me through the darkest moments. Each project became a testament to my ability to rise above the pain and forge a future that was entirely my own. I also began to redefine my relationships with those who mattered. My friends rallied around me, their unwavering support a constant reminder that I was not alone in this journey. I reconnected with distant relatives who had always sensed something was off, and slowly, tentative conversations began to mend old wounds. Although my relationship with my father remained strained, we managed to establish new boundaries, occasional phone calls, short visits, and a mutual understanding that our love was complicated but worth preserving in a different way. I found solace in simple pleasures, a quiet morning walk in the park, a cozy evening with a good book, and even a newfound passion for photography, which allowed me to capture the beauty in everyday moments. Each of these small victories, each act of self-care, was a stepping stone in my healing process. I began to see that while the scars of the past might never fully vanish, they could become the very marks that reminded me of my strength and resilience. One crisp winter evening, as snow gently blanketed the city, I stood on the balcony of my new studio, a bright, open space that symbolized my fresh start. The quiet hum of the city below and the soft glow of streetlights filled me with a sense of hope. I opened my journal and began to write, capturing my reflections on the journey from heartbreak to empowerment. "Today," I wrote, "I celebrate not only my survival but the transformation that has allowed me to live authentically. I choose my own happiness, and I will never again let anyone dictate the terms of my life." Each word was a promise to myself, a commitment to move forward regardless of the challenges that lay ahead. At a small gallery exhibit showcasing my photography and design work, I received unexpected praise from both old friends and new acquaintances. Their words, full of admiration and encouragement, reminded me that my worth was defined by my creativity and my determination, not by the limitations imposed on me by others. I even had a candid conversation with a sympathetic relative who admitted that, in her own quiet way, she had always wished for me to follow my heart. An acknowledgement that, though late, began to bridge the gap between us. In time, my relationship with my father began to evolve. Though the awkwardness never fully disappeared, we found a fragile equilibrium in which I no longer felt forced to choose between family and my own identity. Our conversations, while still tinged with the echoes of the past, gradually turned towards understanding and mutual respect. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was enough for me to know that I had taken the first essential step towards healing. As I look back now, I see that the journey was arduous and often painful. The shock of discovering my father's choices, the turmoil of confronting my own emotions, and the bitter fallout from the family showdown were all chapters in a story of growth and self-discovery. I've learned that true empowerment comes not from adhering to tradition or sacrificing one's dreams, but from having the courage to forge your own path, even when it means standing alone. Today, I stand as a testament to the power of resilience. I am Jessica, a woman who refused to be defined by the awkwardness of a family secret, who turned betrayal into a catalyst for change, and who now lives a life that is unapologetically, beautifully her own. Every day, as I step into the future with confidence and a quiet determination, I know that I have reclaimed my story. The past remains, but it no longer holds me captive. Instead, it serves as the foundation for a future built on self-respect, authenticity, and the unwavering belief that I deserve to live my truth. In the end, the awkwardness, the pain, and the heartbreak became the fuel that propelled me forward. I now embrace a future defined by my own choices, a future where love, creativity, and the courage to be different are celebrated. And as I close my journal each night, I do so with a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that has taught me the true meaning of freedom.